Midwives slash gynecologists of Reddit, what's the weirdest thing you heard from a pregnant woman or her family that made you think they had no prior sexual slash medical education? I've told this story before, but it bears repeating. I worked as a telephone triage nurse and received a call from a very concerned young lady. She said that she was pregnant and had gone to an appointment with her obgyn that day and had some questions. This was relatively common. Patients can sometimes feel rushed in the doctor's office or forget the questions they were going to ask, so they call and ask us later. Me, okay, no problem. How can I help? Pregnant lady, well, the doctor told me I can't have any more sex until after the baby is born. Me, looking at a record in the computer, okay, I see you're pretty far along and were having some preterm contractions, which can be caused by sex. So the doctor recommends no sex, so that the baby doesn't come too early. Pregnant lady, but how will I feed the baby? Me, what? Turns out, her male partner convinced her that babies needed to eat semen to develop, and this could only be done with PIV6. I told her this was totally wrong, and gave her a quick lesson about the umbilical cord. She was skeptical, until I pointed out that single women and lesbians have perfectly healthy babies without constant sex. Oh, okay. That makes sense, she said. Then she thanked me and started to hang up the phone. I could hear her calling her partner's name as she hung up. Would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. I used to work at a family planning clinic. Had a 19-year-old come in, and she was pregnant. She was shocked because she had the Nexplanon implant in your arm to prevent pregnancy. Doctor didn't feel the Nexplanon in her arm. Patient says, oh, I got it removed last year. Then you aren't protected from pregnancy. Just a total lack of understanding about how it worked. We had a woman come to triage one day, in no visible distress, but certain that she was in labor. She denied feeling any loss of fluid, contractions, or pain. When questioned further, she explained that she was already dilated for. She was accompanied by her granny, who explained that she had checked her granddaughter at home, and she was able to fit 4 fingers inside the vajayjay, so she knew it was time. Not in the cervix, in the vajayjay. I work in public health and family practice. We get our own special ones. Most recently the lady with chlamydia that stated she did not use birth control because you cannot get pregnant if you have an STD. Right. Yes, she knew she had the STD, and yes, she was sexually active. Not a midwife, but do medical triage over the phone. Had a 19-year-ring because of abdominal pain. Asked further into the assessment. She was pregnant. She is. Call changes tone. How far along? 37 weeks. Could you be in labor? She doesn't think so. I just need to put the phone on my bed while I get changed. Why are you getting changed? But embarrassing, I think I wet myself. Do you think that could be your waters? She sounds skeptical, but grudgingly agrees it could be. I ask if she can get to the hospital. No, everyone in the house is drunk. I ask if I can send an ambulance. She doesn't want me to as she has a house full of people watching the match. This is during the football World Cup. She eventually agrees, as though she's doing me a favor. A shocking number of women think they cannot get pregnant if they are breastfeeding or just haven't had a period yet after giving birth. A lot of teens think if their period is irregular, they are somehow unable to conceive. You do not have to be menstruating regularly to get pregnant, folks. A lack of a period is not some natural birth control. Also, I see a lot of women who for some reason think they can't conceive after the age of 30 and are shocked when they get pregnant at 35 or 40 or even later. Not an MW or Gino, but one time I made out with a girl and the next day she was crying because she thought she was pregnant. We were 22. When my uncle's ex became pregnant with my cousin, I thought I was the father because I hugged her one day when she was babysitting me. I was 9 when that happened. I once talked to a pregnant woman who had come to an apt for her mother, who I was seeing. The woman was largely pregnant with twins and chomping on ice chips. I asked her why, because sometimes that can be a sign of anemia, and I would have told her to make sure to bring it up with her ob/gyn. She told me she always ate ice chips because she was allergic to water. Her mother agreed. It goes like this. Me, your pregnancy test came back positive. PT, oh, I couldn't be. Me, are you sexually active? PT, yes. Me, are you using any birth control? Part, no. Me, then why don't you think you could be pregnant? Part, because I couldn't be. Me, repeat seen many times over past 20 years. Denial is not a river in Egypt. I work on a busy labor ward. Took a call from a woman who wanted to ask me about a pregnancy test result. I tried to explain that we are for the other end of the pregnancy, but she wasn't really getting it, so for an easy life I just thought frick it and told her to go ahead. I had a baby 12 weeks ago and I've just done a pregnancy test and it was positive. What does it mean? Me, can I ask you a few more questions? Sure. Me, thank you. Firstly, had you stopped bleeding after having your baby? Yes. Me, have you had unprotected sex? Yes. Me, have you had any early pregnancy symptoms? Well, I've been feeling sick in the morning. That's why I did the test. Me, I see. Well, from the information you've given me, then the test may indeed be right and you may indeed be pregnant. But I can't be. I'm breastfeeding. I haven't had a period yet after having the baby. Me, taking deep breath. Didn't your midwife tell you about contraception before you left the hospital? Yes. Me, did you get any? No. Oh, frick. I get so many women who think they can't get pregnant if they are breastfeeding. It's bollocks. If you're reading this, breastfeeding, not using contraception, and not wanting to have a baby in about 9 months time, then stay away from all peens until you've got yourself sorted. Don't wait for your first period. You're fertile before it even happens. I'm a midwife. I was booking a woman at the beginning of her pregnancy and she wasn't exactly pleased about being pregnant. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to continue the pregnancy. There's no point me booking her if she wants a termination. She starts ranting about how it was the soft drinks industry's fault and how she's going to sue them. I was pretty confused at this point and asked her what she meant. She informed me that she had been washing her vajayjay out with cola following sex and that she must have bought a bad batch as she was now pregnant. I went to see a woman who had delivered her first baby a few days previously. I knew she had had stitches, but she seemed to be in a lot of pain. I asked her if she wanted me to check them and she consented, and when I did, I got a strong whiff of chemicals. I asked her what she was using to clean her vajayjay with. We advise women to just use water for the first few days. She told me she was using Dettol, a household disinfectant here in the UK, as she always used it in her kitchen, and she'd never got ill from her food, so it must work in preventing infections. A few words with me, and when I saw her the next time she was moving around freely, like she was in a Tampax commercial. This one isn't really to do with sexual education, but was really a WTF moment. We have bags that are given away to new parents and they have free samples in baby wash, fabric conditioner, nappy cream, etc. I examined a baby who was 10 days old and her skin was almost red raw in places. I thought it was the worst case of eczema that I had ever seen and that she should get the baby checked out at the hospital. While I was trying to get through to them, I asked her if she had been bathing the baby in anything. Again, we advise using water only for the first couple of weeks. English wasn't her first language, but her husband came home at that point and translated for me. They had received a free sample of fabric conditioner in the pack. This had a picture of a smiling baby in the front. They assumed this was baby soap, had bought a massive bottle of it, and had then bathed the baby in it. Neat. Luckily the baby had no lasting effects. Attention, humans with vaginas. Douching is bad. Douching with cola is very bad. Two of my favorites. What day of the week do I need to have sex to have a boy? Do you microchip babies after birth? Not a midwife, but I had an acquaintance try saying that she was only pregnant for 6 months, but that her baby came out full term, like her child was fine, and needed zero medical attention due to being so premature. I don't think she was actively lying, but she was not a bright person. She might have found out she was pregnant at 3 months and just assumed that she was just newly pregnant by the time she found out. Or maybe she felt bad for drinking / partying early in the pregnancy, so she refused to acknowledge it until it was convenient. Either way, it sounded very fishy. Did she get married 6 months before the birth? Lol. Not a midwife, but did have an acquaintance who got pregnant while her husband was in the army deployed. She had convinced her husband that they needed to try and get pregnant. So how did they resolve the issue of long distance and time? They concocted the plan of using a turkey baster, where the husband actually mailed a package of his little soldiers to her, and she used the baster on herself to impregnate herself. No doctors were consulted during this time. And this story all came to light in divorce court when someone actually convinced the husband the baby was not his. I had a coworker who was finding his family through DNA tests and was convincing every relative he found to take them. He got to one guy who was a soldier at some point and had his kids take the tests. Of course, one of his sons came out to not be his. I was told that he had always suspected as much because his son was born 11 months after the last time the guy saw his wife before going on deployment. His son was born 11 months after the last time the guy saw his wife before going on deployment. Doesn't he know how to count? When my great-grandmother went into labor with her first child at 18, she asked how the baby was going to come out, and the midwife said the same way it went in love. Midwife saying, in like a banana, out like a pineapple. My mother is a midwife and this one story sticks out. A couple is in her office looking very somber and the woman has been crying. Mom, what brings you in today? Man, this points to a spot on woman's lip. Mom, looks like a cold sore. Man, what are we going to do about this? Mom, have you tried a breather? Man, that is for herpes. Mom, yes, this is a form of herpes. Man, I knew it. Check her for gonorrhea and chlamydia please. Mom to woman, ignoring man, have you ever had a cold sore before? Woman, yes, in 2012. Mom then had to go in circles for 20 minutes with the man about how it's not sexually transmitted necessarily, how it's very common. She didn't cheat on him since she had it for years, and that he probably had it. He cursed my mom out for accusing him of having an STD after she said that last bit and stormed out. My mom had to have a come to Jesus talk with the woman about leaving this loser. Crazy how little people know and how angry people get about how ignorant they really are. Yeah, this reminds me of my husband. He got cold sores. One unfortunate day I start getting pains peeing. Then it's burning badly. It felt like my hoo-ha was on fire every time I had to pee. I would cry. Finally go to doctors and put on meds. They say probably a UT. Okay, cool. Well, it doesn't go away. Finally beg my husband to look at me down there and he's like, holy shit. It looks like something is coming out of you. Naturally I freak out and start wondering if I'm having a prolapse. Derp. Anyway, go to urgent care and say I think my hoo-ha is falling out. They check and say no, looks like a blister and is filled with fluids. Do a swab and say they'll call me, but if we had sex recently could be friction yada yada. Got a call the next day, doctor informing me it was GHSV1. I relay this to my husband who immediately whips out his wiener and says impossible, I've never had herpes and I don't have any sores. I tried to explain, but he wasn't getting it. Truly naive 40-year-old man. So called doctor back and she explained that yes, cold sores are HSV and yes, they can be spread to other areas. He felt so bad. He wasn't accusing me of cheating, but he couldn't understand how I got it. I reminded him I'd had every test under the sun, especially because I birthed 2 children one after the other, and our child was almost a year at the time, and had never had that result before. He still apologizes to me. It really wasn't that devastating either, to be honest. I only had that one outbreak and that was it. Haven't had one since in 2 years. Plus I got my handy antivirals. Really hard to detect unless you have active breakouts or do a blood test. Many people who have herpes have never showed symptoms. You can get it from so many innocent contacts with other people. I bet if everyone were actually tested, the infection rate numbers would be a lot higher. It's too easy to miss if you aren't even looking for it. Neither, but my high school principal used to work in juvie and told me about a pregnant 14-year-old who insisted she was carrying Jesus reborn. Turns out her father was a pastor and had her convinced he couldn't get her pregnant because he was her dad. Honestly, I never got the talk, but had unsupervised access to the internet since I was like 12. That's really sad and horrifying. Not a NW or Gino, but a story from a doctor in a town where I used to live. A man and wife had a daughter. Then he somehow, farming accident, lost a testicle. Then the couple had a son a year later, so all his parts work, right? Then a few years later they have another daughter. All hell breaks loose in the maternity waiting room between the two families. His family is insisting that the mother was fooling around because he lost his girl testicle in the accident. The doc had to separate them, then had to give a lesson about reproduction right there to explain that men's testicles aren't made to be one to make boys and the other to make girls. Members of both families were apparently confused about it, he said. My dad was a GP. He retired about 10 years ago. He had a couple, lovely people, very young, a bit unworldly, come to see him to discuss their failure to conceive about 30 years ago when I was 10 or so. He was bright enough to ask what they were doing in bed. They had both somehow come to the conclusion that what was needed to make a baby was penis/belly button contact. I have no idea how anybody was getting any satisfaction or how on earth they kept believing this after doing it once. It must have been a horrible experience. He explained, literally, the facts of life to them, and on coming home had the talk with me and my brother, just in case we were also stupid. The couple in question ended up with 2 kids. Good old dad. I'm a midwife. One woman was about 6 centimeters dilated, laboring in the pool. Her partner was murmuring in her ear, which I assumed was reassurances and encouragement. I kept hearing her actively pushing and kept reminding her not to because her body and baby weren't ready yet. It wasn't involuntary pushing. I could hear her hold her breath and push. I came over to listen to baby's heart rate and overheard her partner say to her, "Why are you taking so long? Just push this baby out already." I was a bit shocked. He obviously didn't mean for me to overhear. I kindly told him it didn't work like that and pointed out that if she pushed on an undilated cervix the baby could get distressed, her cervix could swell or tear and she could have a hemorrhage post-birth. He was so confused until I explained that the cervix was not the vagina. I had to give them both a little biology lesson in between contractions. Baby was born 4 hours later. She bled a huge amount and I had to pull the emergency buzzer. 2. I was asking consent from a woman to put in an in and out catheter to drain her bladder. For context, sometimes baby's head presses on the urethra and it's impossible to pee, but the bladder needs to be emptied otherwise it gets in the way of baby's descent. The partner asked if it would hurt the baby and I said no it wouldn't. He then asked if it would poke the baby in the eye and how did I know that it wouldn't hurt. I was a tad confused to say the least. I said well I won't accidentally put the catheter in the vagina, so it won't even touch the baby. He replied well how are you going to get the pee out if you're not going to put it in the vagina? Little biology lesson ensued. 3. A really sad one from a 15-year-old who was pregnant. I was casaloading her and we were having discussions about her friends and family. Important for us to find out if she is being well supported. She was with a loving foster mum who had been having conversations about boundaries around sexual behavior with her. This girl is engaging really well with both me and the foster mum and is always excited to tell me stuff they've been talking about. She said to me, "You know, I had no idea that I didn't have to have sex if I didn't want to. My boyfriend always said that if someone was nice to me, that it was polite to have sex with them." My heart broke. Her boyfriend was on the run because she was 15 and pregnant. Turned out he was 29 and pimping her out to his friends. 4. I get lots of questions from men literally the same day their baby is born asking me when it'll be okay to have sex again. My reply is always when she wants to and not a single day before. I go further into the physical and emotional changes if I think they are going to be assholes about it. 5. I've had a question from a woman asking if her baby can get pregnant if her waters break and she has sex. 6. We do tours of the delivery suite/birth center so that people know what it looks like and what to expect before they come into labor, and one woman asked if the morgue would be on the tour and if she could see any dead people. I flagged her up to her midwife to monitor her behavior. Turns out she's okay. She's just a weirdo. 7. Got a frantic call from a woman at 3 AM. I was on the night shift, asking if she should come in to get checked out. I asked her what the problem was. My pee is really dark. Like bloody? No, it's really dark yellow. I asked her if she could describe the color to me. Sounded pretty normal, wasn't sure why she was worried. After a long conversation trying to find out what her symptoms were etc, she mentioned that she had been really nauseous and hadn't drunk much water that day. I asked if she was usually quite well hydrated, which she was. So I asked her if she knew that when you drink lots of water your urine is quite clear, and when you don't it's much darker, and she had no freaking clue. I told her to drink plenty of water and stay hydrated, and to call if she had any other symptoms / issues and we'd be glad to help. She called back around 7 AM saying it was getting clearer, and she was very happy. Got so many more crazy stories, but these are the ones that always come to mind. TLDR, people need better biology lessons and sex education. I had a cousin that had a friend that told her a way to save money was to stop taking her birth control for 6 months. Friend told her that birth control pills were still effective for 6 months after taking them. As you can guess, she ended up pregnant. It was the only reason we found out about her genius money saving plan. A woman in her 40s with 6 children didn't know that women have a urethra separate from their vajayjay. Son of an ob/gin here. Story 1. Patient, I can't be pregnant. Ob-dad, why not? Patient, we haven't had sex. Ob-dad, have you been naked together? Patient, yes. Ob-dad, has his semen ever made contact with your vagina? Patient, yes. Ob-dad, bad news, those little guys are swimmers. To this day I still wonder if the dude has to pay child support or not. Like my American people, Your Honor, I did not have sex with that woman. Story 2. Fat woman didn't know she was pregnant until giving birth. Ob-dad said family was very excited for her in spite of being surprised. Story 3. Fat woman claimed she was pregnant, claimed she was in labor. Ob-dad had to explain to her and family there was no baby. Family freaked because they'd all been buying her stuff. She started yelling that he'd taken her baby. The ruse was unreal. I heard she ended up in the news later trying to kidnap a child claiming it was from the pregnancy that didn't happen. I'll be honest here, frick it. It wasn't until I was a junior in high school that I realized what sex really was. Before that, I thought you rolled around naked and the girl whacked the guy off. And if you wanted to get pregnant then you jacked off the peen while it was in the vajayjay. So I was beyond confused when my cousin accidentally got a girl pregnant, and I told my friends that all he had to do was not stick his peen in her while having sex. They looked extremely bewildered when I said that. They didn't correct me though, and I'm sure I was a laughing stock, but oh well. I also thought vajayjays were something similar to belly buttons with hair, and couldn't understand how a peen or babies fit in them. And yes, I did have sex ed, but they only covered protection and stuff, not the details of how sex works. Years ago, one of our cats had gotten pregnant, and like idiots, we took her to get her fixed. Afterwards, I guess biologically she thought she'd had the babies, and kept trying to drag our other cats by the scruff of their neck to nurse them. It was both adorable and heartbreaking. Wait, vets will do that to an actively pregnant cat? Or did they just not know? Not a midwife, but I knew a lady who refused to drink coffee, not because lots of caffeine is bad during pregnancy, but because she believed that coffee would turn her baby black. Edit, she's a superstitious Arab lady I knew. Funny enough, the man she married is light-skinned Moroccan guy, and little did she know that his extended family was black complexed. So when the baby came out dark-skinned she was baffled. A heavily pregnant woman put her finger in her belly button and pulled out something gross. She immediately freaked out, making her husband freak out as well. She called my friend, who is a doctor specializing in ob/gyn, and almost cried on the phone. Prigo, help. I just pulled something out of my belly button. My friend, MD, yeah? Prigo, so, have I removed a plug or something? Have I hurt the baby? My friend, MD, but you just pulled something gross from your own belly button, right? Prigo, yeah, but isn't my belly button connected to the baby's belly button? Isn't that how she gets all of her nutrients and stuff? And then they had a long talk about the uterus, placenta and where our belly buttons originate from. Mind you, this isn't about the prego not being educated. She is a lawyer. But she caught Pranan's brain and had a laugh about it afterwards. My dad worked as a hospital orderly to put himself through college. He told me that he went to clean up half of a double room, the other half was occupied. Sitting in the bed was a girl who was somewhere between 14 to 16 going through labor. She was in agony on the bed, her mother holding her hand, and a teenage boy who was most obviously the father was crying in the fetal position in the corner. Eventually, the girl's father came into the room, seemingly having just heard that his daughter was pregnant. She was very small, and it must not have shown well. The father threw the teenage boy against the wall and screamed at him. "How the frick did this happen?" he screamed. Through tears, the kid said, "My brother told me it wouldn't happen if we were standing up." Pregnant woman tests positive for meth, but refuses the flu shot because she doesn't want that shit in her body. I used to work in a medical field and witnessed this hilarity. A teenage girl enters the clinic and gets testing done due to an irregular period. She and her mother are deathly afraid that she won't be able to have kids. Standard tests are run, and she is scheduled for a follow-up the next week. Fast forward to the next week, she and her mother come back to get the test results. Again they bring up their concerns that the daughter may not be able to have kids and how important it is to them that this situation is handled. Sonogram results come up and surprise, it's twins. My high school Spanish teacher in a sexual education program in the Peace Corps for women in a South American country. Most of these women were already married and had many children, but couldn't afford to keep procreating because they could barely afford to feed the children they had. My teacher and a few other women went over how to use condoms. They explained all of the steps for putting it on, using a banana as a stand-in peen, and then distributed free condoms to each of the women. In the next few weeks, they noticed some gaps in their explanations. For example, my teacher was riding her bike home one day and noticed one of the local women hanging condoms up on the cloths line to dry. The woman had been washing them and reusing them. However, the biggest misunderstanding came 2 months later when another woman came to see my teacher. She was screaming and very hard to understand, but my teacher gathered that the woman was pregnant. My teacher explained that it's not a foolproof method, condoms can break, etc., and asked the woman to walk her through how the condom had been used so they could better expand on the issue. The woman replied by saying she had done everything they instructed before having sex. She would roll the condom on a banana and put it next to the bed. TL. Doctor, Peace Corps instructor demonstrated condom usage on a banana. One woman became pregnant after putting a condom on a banana when she and husband had sex. Edit. Spelling. Hey you. If you happen to enjoy this video, why not consider subscribing to stay updated with all the latest videos? And remember to have a fantastic day.